What's going on, guys? So in this video, we're going to take a look at how we can handle uploading files to your server using Node.js. And more specifically, we're actually going to set up a API endpoint using Express that's going to handle all of the uploading of files using a library called Multer. And in this video, we're going to specifically focus on just uploading it to the server and storing it on the server. In the next video, we'll actually take a look at how we can upload it straight to AWS S3. So definitely stay tuned for that video as well. But we're going to start off with the basics in this video and then work our way up. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and create our package.json file. So I'm just going to do an npm init-y. And then I'm going to install Express. And once we have our Express installed, I'm going to create a new file. I'll just call it index.js. And we're going to import Express. Then we can create our Express instance. And then we're going to create our single endpoint that we're going to use for uploading files. So I'm going to do app.post. So this is going to be a post request. And you can set up, whatever route that you want. I'm just going to call the endpoint upload. And then here we can set up our controller. So this is just going to be rec res. And for now, I'm just going to send back a JSON. That's going to say status success. All right. And so that's all we're going to do for now. And then we'll set up our Express server to listen on a specific port. So I'll do app.listen, port 4000. And then I'll just set up the callback, just a console.log as usual. All right, so we've got our Express application set up now. The next thing that we want to do is we want to install the Multer library. So that's the library that's going to handle the uploading of files. And I definitely recommend you pull up the documentation so you can either take a look at the GitHub page or even on the Express page as well. So all we have to do is just npm install Multer. And let me make this a little bigger. There we go. So let's do npm install Multer. Once we have Multer installed, let's import it. So we'll do a const multer equals require multer. And we're going to start off with the simplest example. And we're just going to handle uploading a single file at once. So Multer is going to come with a middleware that we can use, right? And this middleware is nothing special. It's just a regular Express middleware that we can just kind of chain in wherever we want in our route handler so that we can handle the uploading of files. So to set up the middleware, we're going to call Multer. And then here we're going to pass in just one option. And there's a couple of different options. If you want to take a look at it, you can actually hit Control on VS Code and then select this, and it's going to take us to the types for Multer, and it's going to show you the different options if you want to take a look at that, but we're not going to focus too much on that. I'll actually walk you through exactly what you need. So here we're going to pass in an object, and we're going to pass in just one option, which is dest. So dest is going to be what folder do you want to upload the files to on your server. And so I'm going to create a new folder. And by the way, I don't think you actually need to create the folder ahead of time. Multer, if it sees that the folder doesn't exist, I think it should create it for you automatically. But I just want to make sure that you guys understand that this is just specifying the folder that you want to upload to. So I'm going to create a folder. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it uploads. And so here, I'm just going to pass in the name of the folder or the path to the folder that I want to upload to. So it's going to be uploads. And then we want to store this in a variable. And so I'm just going to call this upload. And upload is going to be the middleware that's going to handle uploading the file. So anytime someone uploads a file, our middleware is going to run, and then it's going to upload it to the uploads folder that we just created. And so, like I said, this is just like any other middleware. We just do upload. And from upload, we have to pass in one method. So depending on how you want to set it up, since I said we're going to handle uploading just a single file, you do upload.single. Okay? And we have to pass in one argument. All right? And that's going to be the field name. So when the front end sends us the file, what is the name of the field that the file is going to be attached to? Once again, you can pick whatever you want. I'm going to use the name of file, right? However, you can call it whatever you want. Let's say you're handling the uploading of an image. You could call it image. Just make sure that when the front end sends it, it's going to send it with that specific field name. So I'm just going to call this file. And then make sure you get that extra comma. And that is all we have to do to set up Multer to handle uploading files. So let's test this out. And I'm going to do this with Postman so that I can generate a request. You can do it with your front end. You can do it with just basic JavaScript. You can do it with React. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to send a request to localhost 4000. That's the port that Express is listening on. And then the endpoint, which is /upload. So upload. And this is going to be a post request. Now, the most important thing to remember is normally you would go under body when you set up the body, and then you would do, raw and then JSON. However, for Multer, we actually have to use form-data. So whenever you're sending your front end to send data back to the back end, and you're uploading a file and you're using Multer, you're going to have to always send it as form data. That's an important thing to remember. All right, and then here we specify the key, and the key is going to be whatever you put here. So since our key is file, we're going to call this file. And then we're going to change this to be a file type. Okay, and then we'll select the files that we want to upload. And I'm going to go into this pics folder that I created, and we're going to upload one of the files. So I'm going to upload monkey.jpg. All right, and we got that. So let's then send this. And it looks like it hanged. So let's take a look at what happened. And I realized I forgot to actually start my Express server, so silly me. So actually, I'm going to install NodeMon. And I'm going to go to my package.json, and we're going to just set up a script, start script. So we'll do start. Now just do nodemon index.js. And let's do an npm start. All right, so now it's listening on port 4000. Let's try this again. All right, we got a status success. Let's see if our file actually successfully loaded. So if I go to our uploads folder, you can see that we do have a file now. And if I take a look at this, Express is going to show me the image because it doesn't have the right extension, but that's okay. So you'll see that Multer actually gives it a random, name or ID. It doesn't take it from the original file name. And so we have successfully uploaded a file using the Multer library. So you can see it's actually very simple to set this up. But we're going to keep continuing further. And the next thing that I want to show you is handling multiple files. How do we upload more than one file? Because right now this only accepts one. And we can actually test this out, right? If I go to my Postman and select the files again, and we select two files, and we upload this, all right, you can see that it throws an error, an unexpected field. So Multer doesn't know what to do with this because we selected upload.single, so it's going to throw an error. No worries, not a problem. We'll take a look at this in the next part of the video. All right, so let's set this up for uploading multiple files. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually comment this out for now so that you guys have this when I upload this to the GitHub page. And I'm just going to copy this because for the most part, it's going to be almost identical with just a couple changes. I'm going to just, in the notes, I'll say this is for a single file upload. And this one's going to be for multiple file uploads. All right, and I'm going to uncomment this. And we can set up the middleware exactly the same way. We just specify the destination folder, but we can change this from single to, and actually, let's just actually delete all of this and let's see what VS Code auto completes for us. So we've got single, we've got none, we've got array and fields. So I think you can probably guess we're going to have to use the array because we want an array of images or an array of files. So we do array, and then this time, once again, you just pass in the name of the field. So I'm just going to use the same name, which is going to be file. And I'm going to save this. And now we've got the two files selected once again. So let's try sending this. And it seems to work. And if you take a look at our uploads folder, we now have 3 total files because we got the first one that we originally uploaded, and then we've got the 2 other ones. So that's how you handle uploading multiple files. It's actually really simple as well. Now, if you do want to put in a constraint on the maximum number of files a user can upload, because you don't want to allow them to try and upload like 100 files at once, you can actually put in a second option. And this second option is going to be the max number of files that you want to allow. So if you select 2, we can do that. I'm going to actually delete these files for now, just so it doesn't clutter this up. All right. And if I have 2 files selected, so it should be within the maximum that we're allowing. We hit send. You can see success, both of them uploaded. Now, if I try to do this with 3 files, I'll select 3. And if I hit send, you can see that it errors out. And obviously, we're not handling the errors gracefully. We will take a look at how to handle this a little bit better later on in this video. But for now, I just wanted to show you how to set a maximum constraint on the number of files a user can upload. All right, and so that covers the section for handling multiple file uploads. Then now the next thing that I want to cover is how to specify multiple different fields, right? So maybe you want one field that's going to be called, profile pic or avatar. That's going to be so the user can upload a avatar image, and then we might have another one for like an image of their resume or something, right? So that's an option. That's a possibility. Maybe your front end needs to provide multiple different images to the back end, and we want to make sure that the files are associated with the right keys. So how do we do that? And so once again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this, paste it down here, and I'm going to comment this out. And this is going to be, I'm going to just label this as multiple fields upload. And this time we don't actually need this line right here. Or, well, we do need it, but I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to call this, how about multi-upload? Actually, sorry, I made a mistake. Undo that. Keep this here, but we're going to create a new variable called multi-upload. And I'm going to say this is equal to, and then we're going to reference this upload middleware. So we'll say upload. And then we can specify fields. And then here we can pass an array of the different fields that we want. So before, right, we were just saying uploads.array and then one field. So here we can pass an object that's going to represent one field. So the first one, right, we can give the field name whatever we want. And I'll say maybe this is for the user's avatar. All right. And we can also specify a max count. So the maximum number of files for this field, I'm just going to say 1 for now. And then the second field, we'll say this is for the user uploading their resume. And so I can give this a name of resume. And once again, we can provide a max count of 1. Or whatever you like. Doesn't really matter. And then here, I can just remove this and just call multi-upload. We'll restart that. And so now it's going to look for 2 fields, one called avatar, one called resume. So we need to actually set that up. So this is going to be avatar, and this is going to be a resume. And this is going to be a type file. And I'm going to remove this. Now let's select the avatar now. So we'll select the avatar pic, and then this one's going to be for the resume, and we'll select the resume pic. And we'll upload. And you can see that we were successfully able to upload. All right, and both of those files got uploaded. So that's how we set up multiple fields. You could set up as many as you want. I just wanted to show you at least one example where we have more than one field. Now that we have a basic understanding of how to use Multer, I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive and take a look at how it's kind of working. So one of the cool things is that because this is a middleware, what the Multer middleware is going to do, whether you use multi-upload, whether you use the upload.array or single, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be the same exact behavior, but it's going to take all of the files and attach it to the request object under a property called files. So I can do a console.log Req.files. Right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this upload again, and we're going to take a look at what it prints out. All right. And so you can see that it printed out something. So what happened here? Well, it looks like it prints out a couple of things. So we see the field name, and then we see all of the files printed in it, or all of the files uploaded for that specific field. So it's an array. We only did one file for the avatar field. And you can see a couple of things, right? We can see what's the field name. We can see what's the original file name. We can see the MIME type. This is important. This is Multer will actually figure out what type of file it is. That's a nice feature because you don't want to trust the extension of the file, because I could take a text file and just call it .png, but it's not actually a image, it's a text file. So you don't ever want to trust the name of the file. Anybody can change that. Instead, you want to use the MIME type from Multer to figure out what's the type of the file. Well, we can see the destination, we can see the file name, and then we can even see the path to the folder it was uploaded to. So this is going to be the folder and then the name of the file. And I think it's double backslash for me because I'm on a Windows machine, but it'd be a regular path if you're on Linux or Mac. And then we can also see the size of the file in bytes, I assume. And then we see the same thing for the resume as well. So this is a cool little feature. So, anytime you need to have this information, you've got it at your disposal under Req.files. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is, you could see that Multer automatically generates some random name. And if you want to customize the name, it's going to require a little bit more work. So I'm going to show you guys how we can customize the name so that we can, use whatever naming pattern that we want for our files. And for this video, we're actually going to make use of the UUID library to generate a unique name or a unique ID and then prepend that to the original file name. So actually what I want to do is, if we take a look at, the original name, right now it just says resume.jpg. So when I want to upload this, I want to give it a unique ID, then dash, then resume.jpg. So that's the format I want to use. Obviously, you can use any naming convention you want. I'm just going to show you how to do this just one time, and you'll see that you'll be able to customize it however you want. So I'm going to comment this out once again. And I'm actually going to grab the multiple file uploads for now, because it's going to be the same thing here, but we're just going to customize it. And let me uncomment this. And this is going to be custom file name. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to call the Multer object that we imported. And there's going to be a couple of different options. So by default, Multer supports uploading files to disk and uploading to memory. So if you just want to store the files in memory. And obviously you can install other packages that also allow Multer to upload to S3 and a few other places, a few other object storage places as well. But these two are built in. So I'm going to show you, since we are working with disk storage, which is just uploading it to the server, we're going to call the disk storage method. And here we're going to pass in an object. And the first object is going to be the destination. So we get to customize where we want to send the files to. And you have to pass in a function that gets the request, the file, and a callback function. And here, to specify where you want to send the files to, which is the equivalent of doing this, you just call the callback. The first parameter is going to be null. Then the second one is going to be the path to the folder. So this is going to be uploads. You can put the slash. You don't have to put the slash. It doesn't really matter. Now, the next thing we want to do is customize the file name. So we can call file name. And then here you do, Req file callback. All right. And then to specify what you want the file name to be, you just do callback. Once again, first parameter is going to be null. Then the second one is going to be what the name of the file should be. So this is going to actually run, this function is going to run every time we upload a file. So what we want to do is I want to give it a pattern that's going to look like this, where we call a UUID, and then it's going to generate a unique identifier. And then we do that. And then we grab the original name. All right, very simple. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's install the UUID package. I think it's just UUID. All right. And we can import that now. And so I'll do const UUID equals require UUID, and we'll do .v4. Okay, so this is going to allow us to generate a unique identifier. And here, we're going to destructure out from the file. Right, this file object is actually going to be basically what we got printed out here. So it's going to have all of these properties. So we'll get the original field, we'll get the field name, the original file name, which is what we ultimately want, and then any other data that you want to use. So I'm going to say const original name, and then we'll just destructure that out from the file object. All right, and so once we have that, we can then create a template literal. And here I'm going to say we're going to generate a unique identifier using the UUID library. So I'll do UUID, and then we'll do a dash And then we can, once again, pass in original name. And I think that should give us everything that we want. And so now we have our Multer object. And we actually want to save this. So I'm just going to save this and call this storage. And here, instead of just passing a simple object with the destination folder, we're going to pass in something else. We're going to pass in this new storage object. And if you actually want to see what options you have, just do that and then just see if you hover over it with a mouse, you can see the Multer options, which if you want to, you can actually take a look at all that. But we just pass in storage. And that's all you have to do. And then we can call upload.array once again. And I'll ignore the file limits for now and just call it a file. All right, so let's test this out. And now everything's going to be uploaded under a field called file. So we don't need the resume or the avatar. We're just going to call this file. And let's upload more than one file at a time. So I'll select these two, hit open, hit send. All right, both of them uploaded. What's most important though is let's take a look at the name of the files and let's see if it did exactly what we want. So you can see here we've got a UUID and then dash resume.jpg. So that was the original file name. And then we've got this one, UUID dash, and then the original file name, which is monkey.jpg. Pretty cool. So that's how you change or alter the file name before it gets uploaded. So you could use whatever naming convention that you want. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how you can make it so that users can only upload a specific type of file. Right? You don't want users to be able to upload any old file. It could break your application. If you want a user to upload an image, we need to make sure that our code handles the logic so that we force the user to only upload an image. If we expect a PDF, then we want to make sure that we only get a PDF. If we expect a video, then we want to make sure that we get a video. We don't want to spend time processing a file that we can't even accept anyways. So how do we do that? Well, like I said, when we have access to the file object, we can actually see the MIME type. And that is going to tell us what type of file it is. And then we can just run a simple check and just say, hey, if MIME type equals image-JPEG, if we're looking for a JPEG, you just set it equal to this string. And that's it. It's a simple if statement. And you'll see that the format of the MIME type is always going to be like the parent type. So like this is the image, and then you'll see all of the different images types. So if it's a PNG, it'll be image/PNG. Or whatever other file type. If it's a video, it'll be video / MPV4 or video / what's another video type? WAV. So if you want to say you specifically want a JPEG, you would do image/JPEG. If you want all images, then you would just say if the name before the slash is an image, that's the one I want. Then that's a good enough check. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say the user can upload any type of image, but we can't accept any other type of file. So let's set this up. And so this is what's referred to as a file filter. And if you actually want to see the documentation, I think it's here. If I search for file filter, there you go. And let's see if we can find an example of that. So a file filter, it's going to be a function that gets the request file callback. And it's very simple. You take the callback. And if you want to accept the file, you just say null and then true. That means we accept the file. That means it's of the proper type. And if you want to reject the file because it's an incorrect type, you do null and then false. And if you want, you can even throw a specific error as well. So let's do that. And here I'm going to create a new function called file filter. And we're going to use the same properties the document show. So request, file, callback. All right. And so with the file object, it's going to be this exact object. So we just want to grab the MIME type property. So I'll say if file.MIME type, right? And if we wanted to say I wanted to allow just JPEG, then I would just say equals image/JPEG. However, we want to also accept PNGs and any other image file format. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to split this string up. And we're going to split it at the slash. So it's going to create an array with the first entity being the first, the text before the slash. And then the second item in the array is going to be the text after. And so we could just say if the first item in the array, first element in the array equals image, then we know it is a image type file. So we'll say file.mimetype.split. So this is going to give us that array. We're going to split it on the slash. So we'll have, so what that's going to look like is it's going to say, it's going to look like this. You'll have an array that says image. I mean, technically it'll be in quotes, and then you'll have JPEG. Okay. So we just want to grab the first item in that array. And so I'll do 0. And if that equals just image. That means it is of the proper type. So to pass, or say we want to accept this file, you do callback null and then true. Else, I can say callback equals null false. And we can also throw an optional error. So I'll say maybe new error. And we could say file is not of the correct type. And then once we have the file filter, I'll go into here where it says upload and then pass in another property called file filter. And that's all we got to do. So let's test this out. So I'm going to upload this. Well, actually, I don't remember what I selected. But this time I'm going to upload a doc file. And this should error out our application. All right, so you can see it technically did crash our server. Like I said, we haven't gracefully handling all of the errors yet, but that's okay. But we can see error file is not of the correct type. Perfect. Let's restart our app and let's try it with an image file. Select files, and we've got a JPG file. And if I upload this, you can see status success, and we can see that that's the monkey, but where's the -file.jpg got successfully uploaded. All right, now the last thing that I want to show you guys before we actually figure out how to handle errors better using Express's built-in error handling middleware is I want to show you how we can add more limits, right? So more constraints on what the user can upload, because we did put in a check to see that, hey, are they uploading the right type of files? But there's other things as well, right? We also want to put in limits on what's the file size, right? We don't want to be able to allow a user to upload a 40 gigabyte file. That would be a waste of our resources, especially if we just expect them to upload a simple image. That shouldn't be 40 gigabytes. So how do we do that? Well, I want to take a look at the documentation and look for limits. You'll see the different options that we have. All right, so you can see here, this is the limits key that we can provide. And let's see if, here we go. These are the different limits. So we can specify the field name size, which, I mean, who really cares about that? The field size, don't really care. The max number of non-file fields, that doesn't really matter. Here we go. We got file size. Here we could specify what is the maximum size of the file. You can also specify what's the maximum number of files, the maximum number of parts for a file. The main thing I want to focus on is file size and the number of files. So let's set this up. And so under file filter, we could just do limits, and then we pass in an object. And here we could specify what is the file size. And so this is going to be in bytes. And so this would be 1 byte. If you wanted to do 1 kilobyte, that'd be 1,000 of these. And if you wanted to do 1 megabyte, that's 1,000 of those. So 6 zeros, I think, should be 1 megabyte. Okay. And so if I save this, and now we try to upload a file that's, I think this should be bigger than 1 megabyte. Let's see what happens. All right, it throws an error. And it says Multer error, file too large. Awesome. So now we've set up limits for our file. And if you also want to specify, the maximum number of files, you can just say files and then specify a number. So I'll say 2. And so let me grab a couple of, I'll grab 3 files. Hit send. And once again, error it out. And it says, well, I forgot that I have the file limits. So let me actually add a couple of zeros so that we can see this one erroring out. Send. Too many files. Awesome. All right, so now let's set up some better error handling so that our application doesn't actually crash out, and we can send back a nice response to the user. So with Express, we have a error handling middleware. So if you do app.use and then specify a callback function with 4 input arguments, the first one's going to be error. Then we got request, response, and then next. Okay, so this will run anytime we throw an error inside one of our controllers. And what we can do is we can actually do a simple check. So Multer comes with a specific type of error that it throws. Right, you can see there's an object called Multer error. So this is an extension of the built-in error class for JavaScript that Multer builds upon. So I can say if error, and then we say instance of is an instance of. That's basically checking, hey, is this a Multer error? We can actually call the Multer object that we imported and then call dot Multer error. So this is going to check to see if this is one of the different Multer errors that can be thrown. And that's all you have to do. So here at this point, we can then run some further checks. And actually what I recommend you do is hit Control and open up the documentation. So you can see that the Multer error can be of, you can see the different arguments. We've got the name, code, message, and the error code is what we're ultimately looking for. So the different error codes are limit part count, file size. So this is what's going to get thrown for the error code if the file is too big, unexpected file, field count. So these are all the ones that it supports. So we can just do a check to see if it's a specific error code and then send back a specific response. So here I'll do like another check and I'll say if error dot code, right? Remember we want to check the code equals, and then I can say, limit file size. Then I can just say res return res.json, and then I'll just say, oops, I want an object, and I'll just say message file is too large. We'll save that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this back down to some smaller number. And then I'm going to select a file. And this is for sure going to be too big. And if I hit send, look at that. So now we get a nice proper response where it says, hey, message file is too large. And hopefully our application didn't crash because we actually handled this more gracefully. All right. And we could do a check for all of the other different messages as well. And what I'm actually going to do is, well, actually, let's do one more. Actually, under here, I'll do if. I'll say error.code equals limit file count. Then we'll say, and I'm just going to copy this statement right here. And this time I'll say file limit reached. And now if I select 3 files, open it, hit send. Well, once again, the file limit is also too big. So let's add a couple of zeros just to make sure that everything still works the way we want it to. Hit send, file limit reached, awesome. And I want to do one last check. And I want to change the behavior of our file filter. So for our file filter, I want to make sure that we use the built-in limit unexpected file, so the wrong file type. So when we throw an error, instead of sending a regular JavaScript error, I'm actually going to throw a new multer.multer error. And the code is going to be, and I'm actually just going to copy this string. So that's the code. So next time we send the wrong type of file, we're going to throw a multer error. And then down here, we could just run another if statement. So I'll just copy this. And then change this to be, what was it again? I forgot. Here we go. And we'll say File must be of image type. File must be an image. That's better. And obviously, we can also add in a status. I'll just say 400 for everything. So let's try this out now. I'll upload a PDF and there we go. Proper message. File must be an image. So that's how we can handle errors in our Express application for the various different Multer errors. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. In the next one, we'll take a look at how we can upload the images or the files to AWS S3 so that way we can take a look at a different method of uploading instead of just uploading it to the machine locally. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at how we can upload files directly to AWS S3. And that way, instead of uploading it directly to our Node.js server, which, I think most applications, you wouldn't upload it directly to your Node.js server. Instead, you'd upload it to some sort of storage service like S3 or Azure's equivalent or even GCP's equivalent. And that way, on top of that, you can also set up public access so that if you're building out like a web application, your front end can retrieve those files or images from S3 directly without going through your Node.js server. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to create a bucket in AWS, and then we have to create a user that our Node.js application is going to use so that it has the proper credentials to connect to AWS so that it can actually upload files and retrieve files. So let's create a bucket. The first thing that we have to do is we have to go to S3. So if you don't have the button here, just search for S3 and it'll pop it up right there. All right, and what we want to do is we want to create a new bucket. Name it whatever you want, but it's got to be a unique name, so you can't use the name that I use. So I'm going to call this AWS S3 Node.js upload bucket. And we can select your region. And I'm going to use the default region. So make sure you remember which region you're using. And then everything else can just be left as default for now. We will change one more thing a little bit later on. So we'll select create bucket. And so now we've created this bucket. Where is it? AWS S3 Node.js upload. And you'll see that everything looks good up to this point. And so now what we want to do is go ahead and just copy this name because we are going to need it in a few seconds. What we want to do now is go into IAM. So this is where we set up the permission. So we want to make sure our Node.js application has the permissions to actually access this bucket. And we're going to do two things here. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to create a policy that's going to have the exact rules that will allow our application to access just this bucket. We don't want to give our application unlimited access to all of our AWS account. We want to give him just access to things that he needs and nothing more. So we'll go to policies and we're going to create a brand new policy. All right. And then under service, we'll choose service. And then we want to search for S3. And then here we can select all of the policies that it should have. And so a couple of the policies that we'll need, we'll do get object. So that's going to allow us to get a file after that's already been uploaded. So just search for get object. So once again, that's for retrieving an object that we've uploaded to S3. So we'll need that. We'll also need to be able to upload an object to S3. That's going to be called put object. So we'll do put object. And then we'll also need to be able to delete. So let's look for delete object. And we've got that as well. And then you could also take a look at some of the other ones. There's like get attributes. What is it? Get object attributes. You can also include that if you just want to be able to query the attributes of a specific object. And then we've got all of our policies now. The next thing that we have to do is specify the resource. So right now he has this policy has access to all of our buckets, but we want to just say it should access just the brand new bucket that we created. I don't want him to be able to touch any of the other buckets that I have. So we'll go here and then I'll select ARN. And then like I said, I told you to copy the bucket name. So just paste that in there. And then for object name, I want to basically say for everything in this bucket, give me access to that. So I'll just do a star. So that's kind of like a catch-all, a wildcard. So I'll select add, and now we've set that up. And this should be everything that we need to do from a policy perspective. So we'll hit next tags. And then I don't really care about making a tag. And then we'll give this a name. So I'll just say this is NodeJS Multer S3 policy example. Doesn't really matter what you call it. Just make sure it's got a name that you can easily identify. All right, so now we have successfully created our policy. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create a user account that the Node.js application is going to log in as, essentially. So let's go to users. You'll see all of my users. You probably, if you haven't worked with AWS, you'll just have the default admin, and that's okay. So we'll just do add users. Give it some arbitrary name. And once again, I'm just going to say Node.js AWS S3 Multer example. And what we want to do is we want to select access key. So this is going to be programmatic access. So it's not like I'm going to go to the AWS console and type my credentials. It's going to be all through access keys. All right, then we'll go to permissions. And here we're going to attach the policy that we just created. So that's going to dictate what this user has access to. So we'll attach existing policy. And I forget what I called it. I think there's the word example somewhere in there. Yep, here we go. This is the one we want. So just search for the name of the policy, select it. Tags, don't really care about tags. Review. And we'll create user. And it's going to provide us the access keys and the secret access key. So make sure you write these down. I'm just going to download this because I know I'm going to forget it. And make sure you don't share these keys with anyone else, because if anyone else gets access, then they can upload and delete anything from your S3 bucket. All right, so we've got AWS set up. And so the next thing that we need to do is let's install the necessary library in our Node.js application, and I'll show you how easy it is to upload files straight to AWS S3. All right, so let's set up the AWS SDK in our Node.js application. And there's one thing that I want you to know before we get started. There's actually two different versions. Well, technically there's three versions. However, I don't think anyone really uses version 1 anymore. So there's version 2, and then there's the, I guess it's fairly new, version 3. And I wasn't really sure which one to cover because I think a lot of people are still using version 2. So I was like, hey, let's just go ahead and take a look at how to configure both of them. So we're going to start off on version 2. And then I'll also show you how to do this with version 3. It's a little bit different. I kind of like the way version 2 is set up, but I just want to make sure that you guys can do both anyway. So we'll start off with version 2, then move on to version 3. So to set up version 2, all we have to do is just do an npm install AWS SDK. And then to import it, well, we don't need to import all of that nonsense. We just have to do AWS-SDK. So let's do that now. Let's do npm install AWS-SDK. So this is going to be version 2. All right, so now that it's installed, I can put all of the logic inside the controller, but instead of that, I'm actually going to create a separate file so that we can kind of have all of our AWS code kind of contained to one single file so that we don't have to look for multiple places in our code if we ever want to change anything with regards to which storage servers that we're using, or maybe we want to upgrade our AWS SDK version, and I don't want to have to look through all of my code. So I think it's easier just to set it up so that it's in a separate file. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call this S3 service.js. All right, and since we're using the S3 service, I'm going to import the AWS SDK, and we're going to destructure out just the S3 service. So I'll do const and then S3, capital S. So don't forget the capital. All right, and that's going to import the AWS SDK. So it's going to allow us to handle working with S3. And I'm going to create a function. And we're going to export it. So we'll do exports dot, and I'll call this S3 upload v2, because we'll have one for v3, one for v2. And this is going to be an asynchronous function. All right. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to initialize an S3 instance so that we can actually talk to AWS S3. So we'll do const S3. This is going to be a lower s, and this is going to equal S3, new S3. Okay. Now, if we actually go back to the documentation, we actually have to provide the credentials, right? We have to make sure that we provide the access key and the secret access key. So the old way was we would actually pass it in as an object in here, and we would provide key. So access key ID, secret access key ID. You can see that this is deprecated. So what AWS wants you to do is use environment variables, right? That's kind of the safer method. They want to make sure you don't accidentally hard code your credentials into your code, because then if you upload it to GitHub, then everyone has access to your keys. So we're going to use environment variables. So you can use whatever library that you use to set environment variables, or you could just set it directly on your machine. I'm going to use .env, so we're going to import that. So I'll do npm install .env. And if I go back to my index.js at the top of this file, I'm going to make sure to import .env. So I'll say require .env.config. And then let's create a .env file. And let's figure out what are the environment variables that we need. If you don't know, if you're wondering where I got it from, we can just take a look at the documentation, and it looks like that is not here. Okay, and getting started using setting up SDK for JavaScript, configuring SDK, this is probably where we want. So getting your credentials, setting credentials. So you can see here, setting credentials on Node.js from environment variables. Here we go. So these are the two main ones that we need. AWS access key ID, AWS secret access key. So we'll do AWS underscore access underscore key underscore ID equals whatever, and we'll get that later. Then we have AWS underscore secret underscore access underscore key. So that's the access key and the secret key. You can also specify your region if you want. So mine is US East -1. So hopefully you wrote down where you created that bucket. And then we're also going to have an extra one for the bucket name. So I'll do AWS underscore, and this one you can call anything you want, underscore bucket underscore name. All right, and let's fill in all the values. So I got my Excel sheet that I downloaded. So this is the username. That doesn't matter. We want the access key. So this is the access key. I'm going to copy this, paste it in. This should be an equal sign. And then let's get the secret key. And then the bucket name, let's go back to my web browser. It's called AWS S3 NodeJS upload. Okay, so that's going to be all of our environment variables. And we can delete this object. So right there, S3 or our AWS SDK is already fully configured. So it should have access to S3 already. Now, the way to actually upload a file is we're going to call S3, and we're going to call a method called upload. Pretty straightforward, right? And here we have to provide a parameter object with our configuration. So let me show you what this looks like. It's just an object, and I'm going to call this param. And there's going to be a couple of different options. We have to provide what's the bucket we want to upload this to. So it's going to be bucket with a capital B. And because we set our bucket in an environment variable, I can just do process.env dot AWS underscore bucket underscore name. The next thing we need is the key. So this is going to be, oops, there you go. This is going to be the name of the file when we upload it. And I'm actually going to just do the same thing that we did for the other files, where I set the UUID dash and then the original name. So let's actually try that. And I'm going to import the UUID library as well from here. So let me copy the import statement. And we can also specify what subfolder within our bucket that we want to upload to. So if right now, if I just do, name of file or whatever it is, it's going to upload it directly into the bucket. But if I want to create a folder and then put it in that folder, I can always do whatever the folder name is. In this case, it'll be uploads and then slash. And it's going to put all of the uploaded files into a folder called uploads. And I think that's going to work a little bit better for us. And that's what I'm going to do. And then here I'm going to do we're going to do the UUID, and then we have to give it the original name. So for now, I'm just going to write the word name, just hard code it. It's okay, because we don't have access to the actual name. Then the last thing that we have to do is we have to provide the body property. So what is the body? It's actually a buffer object. So this is going to be our file in memory. So Node.js is going to actually take the file from the client as in memory, and it's going to be stored as a buffer, and then we provide that buffer to AWS. So it's going to be, some buffer. And what's going to happen is the way I'm going to set this up is we're going to receive the file object from Multer, right? And if you remember, the file object has a couple of different properties. Let me see if I can scroll up and show you guys. Here we go. So this is a file object, right? We have access to field name, original name, encoding, MIME type, destination, all of these properties. And when we change the configuration so that we upload it to Multer using the memory storage, we'll also have access to the buffer for the body. So I can just call in file.buffer. And for the name, I can actually get that from file now. So it's going to be file. And it's going to be this name right here, original name. And that should not be capitalized. Do not capitalize it. I don't know why they didn't capitalize the word name in there, but that's all right. And once we have the parameters, we just provide the param in here. And I think by default, S3 is callback based, but you can turn it into a promise by doing promise, which is simple enough. And then here we can just do const, we can do const result equals await, and then we can return result. However, I'm just going to trim that a bit and just return this directly. Okay, and that's going to be our upload function for now. We're going to tweak it a little bit because eventually we want to be able to set this up so we can upload multiple files at once. Right now it only takes one file, but that's okay. Let's keep things nice and simple. Now, from our previous example, if we take a look at our configuration, right, we had this, we called the Multer object, and you can see we used the type of storage, right? That's the Multer disk storage, right? That's what stores it onto the disk of our Node.js application. But we're going to use our memory storage, which also comes built in with a Multer. So instead of storing it physically on the drive, it's just going to keep it in memory because we're going to immediately, as soon as we receive it, upload it up to AWS. And so we no longer need storage here. And I'm going to create a brand new storage. And I'll say const storage equals Multer dot memory storage. And that's all we have to do. So I'm just going to take storage, and it's automatically going to get pulled into here. So we're just setting that to this new storage object instead of the old disk storage. Where is that? This is the disk storage. This time we're just calling multer.memory storage. So that's going to store the file in memory. And then we're going to pass it into upload here. So everything else we can keep exactly the same, actually. So that's all we have to do. We can remove the limits for now if you want, or you can keep it in there. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to still use the same file filter so that we only get images. And then within our controller, I'm going to import the S3 upload function. And so now this is going to be an asynchronous function, and I'm going to do a const result equals await, and we're going to pass in Req.files. Well, actually, we're going to get multiple files, so I'm actually going to extract one file just for demonstration purposes. So I'll do file equals Req.files, and then we'll just grab the first one. Just keep it simple, and then we'll send file over. And if you want to, we can also update the body and say this is a result. Just send the result. Doesn't really matter. Okay, and I think I have to start this again. All right, so let's try this out. Let me grab my files, and I'm going to select these two files. Open that, and let's send it. And it looks like we got an error, and it says parm is not defined. Okay, so I definitely misspelled something. This should be param. Okay, hopefully just that, no other issues. All right, and it looks like everything worked. And let's take a look at the result. So the result that came back, interesting. So it's got a couple of different properties. So you can see we got the E tag, we've got the location of the file, right? So this is, if you ever want to access the file, this is the actual URL. And then we've got the key. So the key was upload / and then we've got the UUID and then the original file name. And for some reason, it gave the key twice. Not really sure why, but that's all right. And then we've got the bucket it was uploaded to. So it gave back all of the data that we need. We don't actually need to send the result back to the client, but you could see that uploading files was pretty easy. But let's just double check and make sure that it's actually in the bucket. So I'm going to refresh, and you can see that it did in fact create a folder. So let's go into our folder, and we can see that we do have the resume.jpg. And if you click on this, we can actually download this file. So if I select download, and we've got the image. Now, one thing to note is that if I actually try to go to the URL, oh, I didn't mean to click that. And then just paste it in here. Right, you see that we get an access denied. So this is due to our bucket policy. Right now it's set up so that public users do not have access to it. Only people with the specific credentials can access it through, the API basically. So, if you're building a web application, you definitely want to make sure that your client can actually access the images so they can load it on the web page. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at how we can set up the policy in S3 to make sure that public users do have access to the files and the images. Okay, so one thing I want you guys to do is go to this page right here. So you can just copy this URL right here and go down to bucket policy examples. So AWS is going to provide us some examples of how to set it up so that public users have access to these files just for read abilities. We shouldn't allow them to delete any files. We shouldn't allow them to add new files, just be able to access the files themselves. And so there's this section right here, granting read-only permission to an anonymous user, which is like a public user or your client or front end. It doesn't really matter, but we can pretty much copy this exactly. And all we have to do is just update the bucket name when we paste it in. So let's copy this. And then under permissions for your bucket, go to our bucket, permissions, where it says block public access, we want to change this and uncheck that. So we'll save this, and we're going to have to confirm. So this is going to give public access, and then we want to put in a policy by hitting edit here, and then pasting this. And then all we have to do is just copy the bucket name, right there under the resource, and this is basically saying any files within this bucket. And if you want to, you can even be more specific and say under the upload folder, grab anything from there, but it doesn't really matter how you do it. Okay, and we've got our new policy. And so if I refresh this page now, you can see that it automatically downloads it. And I can now embed this URL as a image object inside an HTML file so that it works like a regular application. All right, and so now in the next section, we're going to configure it so that we upload multiple files. And it's going to be a little bit trickier, but you'll see it's not too bad. It's just pure JavaScript and handling multiple promises at one time. Okay, so going back to our code, you can see that right now our function only takes one file. And we obviously want to be able to upload multiple files at once. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, I'm going to just change the name just to be files, just to represent. We're going to receive more than one file. And under index.js, where we go to our controller and we're passing just one file, we're going to remove that. And I'm going to pass all of Req.files. So now we're getting all of these files, and you have to understand we're getting an array of file objects. So how exactly do we upload multiple files now? So there's no like special method from S3 that allows us to upload multiple files or bulk update or bulk upload all at once. Instead, we have to call this method multiple times. And you don't ever want to just do something like, I'm sure you guys are thinking like, hey, let's just do this. And then we define a separate parameter, and then we can provide that with param2, param3, and so on, right? That wouldn't work because then we would send one file, wait for that to finish, send the next file, wait for that to finish, send one file. So we're doing it all synchronously, and we don't ever want to do that. We want to do it all asynchronously. So we want to fire off all three of these all at once. So how exactly do we do that? It's pretty simple. We have to make use of a special thing called promise.all. So before we even do that, what I want to do is I want to generate the params for all of the files. So remember, we're getting an array. And what I want to do is I want to iterate over that array using the map method. So I'm going to say const params. This is going to return an array of parameters, which equals, and I'm going to say files dot map. And so we're going to iterate over the file. And here we're going to get access to each individual file within the array of files. And remember, like I said, each individual file is going to look like this. So we're going to get all of these fields. So we're going to pass this into the callback function, and we're going to get access to this file. So we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to return an object with the same exact property. So I can literally just copy all of this directly. And I can remove this. So we don't need that. So we now, params is going to be an array of all of the parameters for each of the different files. Now, the last thing that we need to do is I'm going to do promise.all. So this is how we upload multiple files at once. We're going to basically await all of our promises all at once. And we're going to have to make use of the map method again. So I'm going to say params, right? That's going to be this array of parameters. And I'm going to map that. And so we'll get an individual param. And here, we're going to do the same thing we did. Well, I already deleted it, but it's going to be the s3.upload. And then we'll say, we're going to pass in the param that we are iterating over, and then do a dot promise. And then now we can await all of the results. And then we can just return results. We can just return up here as well. It doesn't really matter which one you do. Actually, I'll just return here as well. And we don't need that. So we'll get that. And then the index.js, you'll see that we get results now. And you'll obviously want to put this in a try-catch block in case, something errors out. And if we want to, we can do a console.log of results. And then I'll just copy this res.json to over here. And if there's an error, handle it accordingly. I'm just going to do a console.log just to show. But you just handle it like, any other controller. If there's an error, you send back an appropriate message to the user. Okay, and so let's restart that. Make sure you save all your files. And I'm going to send two, and it looks like, yeah, I forgot. I accidentally messed up my request. Let me add a new request. And I'm going to make sure to select two files. And let's try this out. And it looks like we got an error, and it says result is not defined. And I'm not sure why it's throwing that error. Let's take a look. Oh, it's because I still have this right here where I'm sending the result back to the user. Okay, that's a simple mistake. Let's try this again. And we get a status success. And if you take a look at what we printed out, you can see the two resulting objects. So we've got the first file, which is the resume, and then the second file, which is the turtle. And so that's how easy it is to set up uploading of files to AWS using the version 2 SDK. In the next section, we'll then take a look at how we can do this with the version 3 SDK. It's a little bit, I don't know, I felt like it was a little bit more confusing, but it's still not too bad. It's going to be similar logic. Okay, guys, so for setting up the AWS SDK version 3, it's a little bit different, right? We're not going to be able to do the simple npm install AWS SDK. Instead, if you actually take a look at the documentation, it's going to be installing it on a per resource or per service basis. So if you want to work with DynamoDB, you would do npm install AWS SDK / and then client DynamoDB. If you want to do for S3, it would be client -S3. So it's per service. It's a little bit different, but let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to do an npm install, and we want to do at AWS SDK / client -S3. Now remember, this package will only allow us to work with S3. We can't work with any other services within AWS. We'd have to install the respective package for that. Now, when it comes to credentials for the version 3 SDK, it's the same exact system. So we have the same environment variables. We don't have to change anything. It uses the same key, access key, and secret key. So outside of that, I think we can go and create our function. And so I'm going to do, once again, an exports dot, and I'll call this S3 upload v3, which equals async. And I'm going to show you how to do it with one file, and then we'll take a look at how we can do it with multiple files. Like I said, doing it with multiple files is a little bit more confusing. I want to make sure you guys understand how to do it with one file before we move on. So from the SDK, we want to import S3 with a capital S client. And this is going to be from at AWS SDK / client S3. And within here, just like with V2, we have to initialize it first. So I'll say const S3 client equals new S3 client. So we create an instance, and we want to do the same thing. It's going to require the same exact parameters. So let's create an object called param, which equals, and actually I could just copy all of this in. Except for the return, we don't need that. So same thing, we're going to need to provide the bucket, the key for the file, as well as the file buffer. And then we're going to call S3.client. S3 client.send. And here we have to create a new object. And specifically, we're going to call the put object command. So we're going to have to import that. So we'll do capital P U T object command, and we should just let VS Code import it. But if you guys want to see what the import looks like, it's just put object command from the SDK. So this is how we put an object into the bucket. And then here we just pass in param. And what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and delete everything from the bucket so that we can verify that we successfully uploaded this file from the new SDK. So let me just delete this. And this is always a pain. So we'll delete the objects. And so now our folder should be empty. And it is perfect. And once again, we can just do a return. And that's going to, this is already a promise based method. So it's going to return a promise. So we could just return it directly. Or if you want to, you could always do, const result equals, and then we can await it here, but doesn't really matter. I'm just going to return this. And then on index.js, I'm going to comment out version 2. And actually, let me keep this here. And I'm going to create a second one so that you guys can at least take a look at the difference between the two. And I'm going to just comment that out. And then here we're going to import version 3. And then we'll let VS Code import it. Just double check that it imported it. And we've got version 3. Perfect. And once again, we're going to do just with one file. So I'm going to say const file equals Req.files. And then we'll just grab the first one. And then we'll send file over. And let's try this out now. So I'm going to send the same two files. We got a success back. It looks like there's an issue because it says undefined here. And I suspect that's this console.log. So let's take a look. I think something probably went wrong, and we'll double check here. Let's see, did it upload it? Yeah, it didn't upload anything. That's okay. So let's see what broke. So we call this. And I think I just forgot to save it. So let me try it again. I think, yeah, there we go. Now it works. So yeah, I just forgot to save it. So the result of the version 3 SDK is a little bit different. You can see it includes the E tag as well, but it doesn't really provide much other information. So if you get a status code of 200, that's a good thing. That means it went through. If you got like a 400, a 401, or 403, anything in the 400s or 500s, that means something went wrong. But 200 means it's good. And if we actually go back to the console, we should see, after refreshing it, that we did in fact upload the one image. Now, the one thing I don't like about the AWS SDK version 3 is that it doesn't automatically return the URL for us. So you either have to run another request to get that object's details, or it's we always know the structure of what the URL is going to be, and you can see that by going here and then going to selecting this image, and you can see the exact URL. So your URL is always going to be this first part /uploads and then the name of the file. So your backend doesn't even need to retrieve that URL from AWS. It can always build itself. You can just store this as an environment variable, and then you just append the image name that you created in your code when you passed in the parameters, which would be right here. So you can just append that, and then you can construct the URL yourself. So something to keep in mind, is a little bit different in version 3. And so uploading it, that's all you have to do for one file. Let's now convert it to multiple files. And it's going to be the same concept. We're going to do the promise.all and then map all of them together. So I can actually copy this first map statement here to create our params. and then this is going to be files. And then we're going to do a await promise.alt. And we can say we're going to iterate over the params or map over it, params.map. And then we're going to get access to an individual param. And then here we just call this right here. And then we can just return this. And we can get rid of this line. All right. And I think that should be everything that we need. We just have to update the controller so that we are passing all of the files. So I'll just do Req.files. And let's try this. Status success, that looks good. And we did get an output, so let's take a look. So the first file, we can see status code of 200, so everything's good. Second one, status code of 200, everything's good. So we successfully uploaded 2 files at once. And if you want to just double check in your folder, we should now have 3 files in there. And so that's how you handle uploading files to S3. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It's, uploading files to Node.js, uploading files to AWS S3 using Node.js, dead simple with the Multer library. And hopefully you guys liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe.